Hello everyone and welcome to a compilation review. And in this video I'm going to review Flowers in Concrete. You know that in this channel I don't usually talk about various artists compilation because it's not that much of an interesting topic to me. However, when it comes into talking about the various artists compilation, it's obviously for something that I feel it needs to be mentioned. Now, this compilation over here is quite interesting. This is a massive double album compilation released digitally on Bandcamp from OCHIAI Soup, which is an independent music venue in Tokyo which in recent years had some names here and there with some releases, but it's up until recently where the label and the venue in general have put lots of their works being available on Bandcamp. And these two albums were made in the sense that after the pandemic with the COVID-19 situation, this very small independent label was obviously hurt by all of this. So the albums are for free, they're name your price, but anyone can support if they want to, and there is a very large collective of noise musicians all over the world just making songs dedicated to the work for this label, and it obviously in such a short period of time makes for their most well-known work so far, since the amount of names they have with both of those albums are some of the very significant names in the underground noise scene being placed in those two albums. It is separated into different sides, which is side Japanese and side international. In the Japanese side, as you could obviously tell, you have lots of numerous Japanese artists that just play in the noise scene. I was not aware to most of them prior to this release, but there were definitely some very important names like Kazumoto Endo, for example. And when it comes to the more recent underground scene, there are artists like Weeds that I know, and also Linecraft, who is more into the more power electronic scene. And this compilation in general has lots of more recent names as I see. On the other hand, when it comes to the international side, the name recognition is quite interesting as we have artists like Aaron Dilloway being placed, Daniel Menche. There is also a track of Toshiji Mikawa with John Wiese out of all people. Then you have artists like Torturing Nurse and also Vomir. And there is also an additional track from Sickness, who I've heard some of his projects and I think he's a very good noise artist. So there was obviously that name recognition that would just grab my attention, grab my curiosity. And talking about these two projects, the Japanese side is honestly amazing in my opinion. I pretty much love most of the stuff that are contained in this project. In my opinion, this album makes a fairly decent start, not something that would really grab my attention. It was by three artists that I wasn't aware of their works at all before. Blackphone 666 has a very decent noise track with lots of free improvised elements. Then GC Skull Electronics, it is a very aggressive track and I like that it goes with multiple different phases, also having some sounds that give a metal abuse noise feel to it. And then there's also Government Alpha, which goes into the very sort of free improvised sound, and I like the textures and the sound of this thing. But overall I thought that the first three tracks were just fairly decent. When we get though to the Kazuma Kubota track, this is where the album gets really intense. Kazuma Kubota is one of those artists that has worked with Kazumoto Endo recently, and it really makes me want to get into some of his works because I really love the sound of this thing. It is basically cut up noise, something that we also see with the work of Kazumoto Endo over here, but Kazuma Kubota has such an amazing sound on this thing. I like that it has this very monotone, very sort of silent, dark ambient tone to it, that it's very sort of creepy and haunting, but then you get those multiple highly textured noise sounds that come into lots of different portions throughout this whole silent passage, and it's just amazing. For some cases it feels like a sort of a jump scare because they just get into so many abrupt moments throughout this whole track, but the sounds he uses, the textures, are so immaculately good. I really love the sound design of this thing. It is really amazing, so perfectly detailed. The high resolution in lots of those sounds coming in all over the place, and all of those different distorted portions and those glitch elements that are surrounded in this song make for some amazing moments throughout this whole thing. This is also the same that happens with the track of Kazumoto Endo, who in this occasion, when it comes to the main sound, he has 3 different phases, all of them just looped in a fast speed and being some distorted bass sounds, which by themselves they sound quite typical and quite sort of generic, but in the whole context with those looped sections and the other high fidelity sounds he uses and that come out of nowhere, it makes for an amazing result. And he has a very good use of a bit crusher effect through some of those distorted and glitchy portions, which at sometimes it can be quite risky since it makes for some bad results, but this is not the case with this amazing track of Kazumoto Endo. Like which takes the direction he pretty much took with his previous tape, which ended up being possibly my favorite work of his. It has this very non-stop, punchy and heavy distorted kick sound with a very nasty bass to it that repeats itself over and over, and he just uses lots of different sounds here and there. And I especially like it towards the end where you have this more sort of music concrete and field recording portion with all of those different metallic equipment that he uses, and it makes for a very nice result. Linecraft's track makes a very good use of sampling. I would like a bit more of a vocal front to this track, but it's a very solid power electronics work, something that he enhanced and embraced very well with his last album, and this track also makes for a very good moment. Now we get into the Pigs track, which is a harsh noise wall track, but to my surprise this is a very good track. I love the sound to this thing. The textures are so spot on. I like how this track doesn't overstay its welcome, it's straight to the point, and the sound is definitely one of the greatest highly textured tracks I've heard in a harsh noise wall track. I really love the sound of this thing. Ska makes a track that pretty much goes to this really unpredictable cut up noise sound that we saw with Kazuma Kubota and Kazumoto Endo, and it makes for another amazing moment. Amazing production, supremely detailed sounds, and some of the very fast paced moments with some of the LFOs here and there give the impression that I'm listening to a very abstract speedcore track. Shinkaku's track is a great example of a very solid metal abuse noise track. There's just so much metallic equipment being smashed in this track, and I like that there is this very straight spanning from right to left in some of the sounds, and it makes for a very nice and cohesive mess. The final track, Wolf Creek, I don't know why this track in particular ends up being the longest one, going for almost 8 minutes, since I don't really feel it needs to, but it's a quite nice free improvised noise track with some quite nice textures to it. So this compilation ended up being really amazing, and not only that, this automatically becomes one of the essential various artists compilation in noise music. If you want to get into the more underground side of noise, this is an amazing compilation. This is a must. So many Japanoise artists over here making some great works, and it's also a great example of more recent noise music being so highly textured and so well produced, pushing the limits of what was just known for noise music to be just raw and lo-fi. There is a lot of effort put in so many of these tracks, and it's also nice that it doesn't go into a specific genre. There are so many different subgenres of noise music that are portrayed in a very good sense in this whole compilation. So yeah, the Japanese side is an absolute must in my opinion. On the other hand, now getting into the international release, it was a massive letdown. Getting into both of those various artists compilation, it is like night and day. After being so amazed with the results of the Japanese side, I was definitely expecting something more out of the international side, especially considering that it has a bigger name recognition and more artists that have been working and making noise for numerous years, and it's not just mostly recent artists. Now, getting into each track, Aaron W.A.R has a very nice song. It's pretty much what I know from Aaron W.A.R. He starts with some loop portions, and I would hope that it go there, but it ends up leading to a very nice decent amount of multiple free improvised sections, which end up being quite good. I didn't really enjoy the sound of this thing that much. I definitely would love more punch to it, but it's certainly a very good song. Not something really impressive, but it's really good. The track From Being is my biggest highlight out of this album, because this track is so varied. It doesn't just go and focus into one specific sound of noise music. Instead, it just constantly changes, and throughout all of those changes, the track just keeps getting better and better and better. There is a very nice sound to it, supreme details, very professional, very nice production, and I like how it transitions, and at the second half you get more of like a silent bassy feedback. There is some metal junk abuse noise that it's filled with delay and lots of other effects that come next, and then it ends with a very highly and well textured noise segment. Daniel Mentz's track is much longer than needed. It didn't need to be 8 minutes in my opinion, and as far as it had some nice elements here and there, the sound of this thing was not that much of my cup of tea, and it's pretty much the opposite with like the sound I enjoyed so much in the Japanese release, because lots of those moments sound fairly lo-fi and not being that adventurous, which is something that I would hope would not be that much of the case. But getting even further into the track listing, we have the tracks like Fleckalov, Kiran Arora and Leipi, whose introduction has some nice moments here and there, but as the songs progress, they feel sort of uneventful and not that much going on, or even the potential for something greater is lost. There are some nice moments here and there are some nice textures. Leipi, for example, there are some nice moments with some of the high frequencies and the details to the sound, but the whole thing was not that adventurous or that groundbreaking in my opinion. Then out of nowhere we get a track from Matmos. How is this even a thing? Why is this in there? I was really surprised, like, are Matmos going to make a noise track specifically for this compilation? Now this is a soup mix, but yeah, there's actually not a noise element in this track. Like, you can take like some in the beginning, but this is pretty much a basic sort of Matmos electronic track that makes no sense being in this compilation. It comes out of nowhere, and it's not that much of a great track either. I think it's slightly repetitive, and I don't really like the sound of this thing. It was quite forgettable. And that's another thing that comes with this album, is that it ends up being much more of a mess that doesn't even enhance that much the beauty of every single harsh noise direction taken with the international side. Even when it comes to the album itself, it's much longer, and there's not really that much of a balance with the track length of these albums at all. The track from Purges is one of my favorite moments, since it has those nice scenes that make for a sadder atmosphere. It makes for a sort of death industrial moment that gives me an impression that I'm listening to a prurient song, and I also like how you're just distracted constantly by those multiple noise sounds coming occasionally, and it makes for a very beautiful and solid experience. The track from Shredded Nerve is also one of the highlights in this album. It is a track that focuses more on silent feedback and some music concrete elements that are just sounds of multiple objects, and as the track progresses it gets more and more intense. I was definitely expecting something more from Toshiji Mikawa and John Wiese. You definitely get some high textured and very well produced stuff with lots of unpredictable glitchy moments here and there, but it's another one of those tracks that as it progresses it gets more monotone and not that much eventful. Torturing Nurse actually has one of my least favorite songs over here. It starts with a very monotone weak noise sound that goes for about half of the song, which gives me the impression that I'm listening to constant pink noise without that much of like anything to it. And then it has this sort of alarm sound that is quite silent, and also with bird recordings. It is an all over the place track that I wasn't really that much of a fan. Unsustainable Social Condition has an almost 10-minute track that in my opinion was not that great. Quite boring, quite generic harsh noise stuff with not that much to it. Vomir's track, it's Vomir. I obviously expected that it would go into a monotone direction, that I'm going to listen to the same thing for 4 minutes, but even the sound of this thing was not that much of my cup of tea. I would prefer if it had more of a low frequency to it in order to give it a bit of a more punch, since the track by itself, it sounds quite empty and there would be more to it in my opinion. The additional track from Sickness pretty much had what I expected from Sickness. It has lots of very adventurous and out there glitchy portions, but it's for such a small period of time. Like, what's with all of the silent moments in this track? It is 5 minutes and pretty much most of the track is just complete silence. You just have like 1 to 2 second jump scares at the beginning at 1 or 2 moments. It's almost half point through the track where you get a bigger moment, but it's just abrupt silence again. And I really don't know what was with this track and why it was 5 minutes long and why there was like so much silent space to it. So yeah, this is kind of weird because listening to the Japanese side at first, I was expecting the same sort of quality with the international side, which is something that I didn't get. Instead, the international side ends up being quite the opposite of the Japanese side. It is pretty much what I don't really love that much from the current noise scene, and the one side I would say that noise musicians should avoid. Certainly there are some great moments that you can take some very good examples, but most of the stuff over here feels like some quite generic and typical noise stuff. So yeah, quite indifferent towards the international side. So rating them separately, I'm going to give the Japanese side an 8 plus out of 10. I think it's an essential work that you need to check out, especially if you're into underground noise music. On the other hand, I'm going to give the side international a 6 minus out of 10. Definitely some great moments here and there, but lots of the stuff could be handled in a better way, in my opinion. What's your opinion on this various artist compilation? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.